as she found him, but he'd been uncharacteristically kind last night when he'd offered to keep her company while everyone else, including her 2 older brothers, mother and father and grandmother, as well as Marcus's parents and grandparents, went on a moonlit excursion to the Temple of Karnak. Syble's parents felt she was too young to stay out all night, a fact Syble had attempted to refute, but to no avail. Instead, she'd faced the awful prospect of spending a boring evening alone in her cabin aboard the steamer until Marcus had come to her rescue, volunteering to stay behind with her. Even now, she wasn't sure why he'd done it. Maybe because he, too, was the youngest in his family, though all of his American half-siblings were married, and could empathize with her lot in life. Either way, she was grateful for his kindness, and she could show it by not intentionally goading him this morning. "Thank you again for staying on the ship with me," she conceded. "And playing games when you could have been reading." To her relief, his stiff posture relaxed. "It wasn't so bad. Besides, I finished my book last night, after you went below deck." "What do you mean?" She pointed at the volume in his hand. "That isn't the one you started yesterday morning?" His eyes finally flicked to hers, and a small smile edged his mouth. "No, this would be a new one." He'd read the other book in a single day? She couldn't help but be impressed. "Have you read an entire book in a day before?" he asked, his tone too pointed to be casual. Syble straightened in her chair and threw him an imperious look, though she wasn't sure he saw it. "Of course." "I'm not speaking of romance novels." Her mouth dropped open in shock. How did Marcus know she read such books? She'd been careful about hiding them. The only person she'd confided in about her discovery of romance novels was her best friend back home in New York, Gwen Barton. Marcus chuckled. "You may have fooled the rest of them by tucking your romance novels inside that history book." He turned his page with nonchalance. "However, I've read that particular book on Egypt, and there is nothing in it that would have inspired such a riveted look on anyone's face." Irritation heated the collar of her dress, a phenomenon she'd experienced several times a day while on this trip with Marcus and his family. He might be handsome in a bookish sort of way, but he was also incredibly irritating. "I'll have you know, Mr. Brandt, that I wasn't just using that history book as a ruse. I actually read it and found it to be quite enthralling." He quirked an eyebrow above his glasses and silently regarded her with blatant skepticism. Sybil did her best to maintain a stoic composure, but when his mouth tilted upward again, she couldn't hold in her giggle any longer. "Fine. It was awful and dry." The half-smile turned a bit fuller. "I completely agree. Now this one." He held it up for her to read the title. "It's a page-turner." "Which is saying something, given the other books I've seen you reading." He laughed, and the sound was nearly as cheery as the sunshine bathing the Nile on all sides now. "How long before our families return to the steamer?" Sybil asked. She didn't want to sit around waiting for them all day, not when adventure called to her from the shoreline. "I believe our dragoman said not until lunchtime." She frowned in disappointment. Lunchtime was still hours away. "What if we ate breakfast now and then went to visit the bazaar he told us about?" Marcus glanced up from his book to the shore with obvious hesitation. "I had planned to do that later." Sybil wrestled with a familiar flicker of exasperation at the young man's lack of impulsiveness. They were in Egypt, after all. Reading shouldn't be the priority for the day. Exploring and experiencing Luxor should be their aim. But she couldn't wander around the city on her own, and she wasn't going to convince Marcus to accompany her by pointing out the flaws in his plans. She might be able to convince him with a more tactical approach.